Welcome back to Psychology of Peace Building, Week 4. Once again, I have several different theories and techniques I'm going to introduce to you this week. I'm going to use a couple of PowerPoints when I talk about listening, the different levels and reframing, but I would like to start without a PowerPoint with conflict and systems analysis, diagnosing roles, relationships, and related variables, force field analysis, and Tubbs variables. Now, you will be acquainted with what I just said if you're actively engaged with your reading and with the activities in your workbooks, because you will be actually working with all of this. But I'm going to briefly introduce these today, and then some of you may go back to the workbook and reread and work the activities. However it works for you is fine with me. You can always come back to this too, and feel free to ask me any and all questions. As I introduced last week, at the systems level, when we're talking about conflict, we're often looking at complex, what we call toxic systems. You know, toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, and what we create as systems with the ways we relate to each other, the roles that we play, child-parent role, wife-husband role, and then all these different variables that are introduced in your reading. We will be focused on communication, some basic communication as a variable today, and also I will be talking about the need to gather information about the system. Force field analysis was introduced years ago by Kurt Lewin, and it's just a brilliant, easy, simple model for assessing and analyzing a toxic system. You divide all the variables, everything that happens within that system, into some simple columns, a plus column and a negative column. Everything that's building peace, that's encouraging peace, and everything that is creating ugly, destructive, potentially violent conflict in your minus column, right? And then you brainstorm how to empower the positives, how to strengthen, and how to reduce the negatives. That's very fundamental, simple systems analysis. Tubbs variable divides it more into communication, power, a variety of other variables. I'm not going to go there today. You can bring up whatever interests you from your reading in Canvas with me. Let me talk about the critical importance of extraordinary information gathering. I'm very intuitive. I'm a bullseye archer because I have such great vision, and I notice things. I do process observation quite well. I think it's one of the reasons I teach what I teach, and I work with people around the world because I open my mind and I notice what's going on and I sense what's going on. But I also, when I'm hired to do peace building with a toxic system, I'm asking people a lot of questions, right? And I'm doing it usually privately, confidentially, because people are not going to want to say their honest, whole, destructive, conflicted experience, in a public forum, not unless I create an extraordinarily safe public forum. So I'm getting to know different perspectives, different experiences of what's going on. Now, my PowerPoint today is going to focus on levels of paraphrasing and listening. And then I'm going to spend some extra time on the deepest level, the most critical level. But skilled questioning, and this is a big topic when it comes to culture, because some cultures do not appreciate direct questioning, so it needs to be done with sensitivity and awareness for the cultural groups that are involved. But the levels of listening are pretty universal. And let me start with And we call this paraphrasing in peace building because the listener needs to show the speaker that they have actually been listening. This is not pretending to listen. That doesn't build any peace, guys. I know some of you pretend to listen to your girlfriends and wives because I've been doing this a long time, and I've been married, and I am married, but that doesn't work. You have to actually show the speaker that you have been carefully listening to them. And when you paraphrase at the surface level, you are summarizing their most important points. And you are reflecting it back to them because they may have something they need to change or correct, right? Or add. And they are the experts here. So you want to summarize the main points of what you've heard and then let them correct you. Let them keep talking. Elaborate as much as they need to because they're the ones that needs to express whatever they need to express. We are following their lead, the speaker's lead here with our listening. Now, as you do this, you're building trust. You're letting the person know that you're suspending judgment. You're a safe place, right? And so I want to go to the next level, which I think is incredibly important. The empathetic level, the level of emotions. With peace building, we must embrace all human emotions. We're not talking heads here. We're not doing an authoritative process. We're doing a human process. If you can feel sincere empathy for what the speaker is saying, please show them. Californians, in my experience teaching you now for 25 years, are masterful empathetic listeners, but it must be sincere. It cannot be pretend, because that will backfire when someone is angry, hurt, and under a great deal of stress. If you can do it sincerely, that empathy will help you go deeper with your speaker, and they will be sharing with you all that really matters to them. So you're going to then go to the next and the deepest level, which is the level where you are able to hear and understand what is most important to them. Now, guys, if you have a hard time with crying, with emotions, this is something you'll need to work on. I've had long conversations with my male students over the years about women who manipulate with tears. We're not talking about intimate relations when I introduce this to you, right? Yeah, if you know the speaker and you know what they're about and what their motives are, you gotta use that wisdom. But with most human beings feeling empathy when they're in pain, and there are people who cry and there's nothing manipulative about it. Or women, if you're scared of anger, we can talk about that. You need to be able to relate at the level of emotions. Okay. This takes practice. See what works for you. The deepest level is what I call reframing. And that is when you are identifying what is most important, what's needed by your speaker. Usually people who are angry, sad, upset, don't even know what's most important to them. I mean, think of a time when you've been frustrated, angry, stressed, sad, grieving, upset, just at your limits. There's a lot going on inside. So you don't necessarily know what it is you need, what would help you calm down, what somebody can do to help you contain that emotion. I'm going to go through a lot of slides quickly with you this week because I'm just introducing this to you, and you might find some things more interesting than other. Let me know. But It's a good rule of thumb to ask yourself, when do I feel sincere empathy from another? Because we're all different. And we need to use ourselves as the experiment, right? So just explore this. Paying attention to nonverbals is critical no matter what culture you are from or what cultures you're working with. Some people really need and want eye contact, and other people don't. You need to get to know whoever you're listening to, right? Some people enjoy more body space. These are all cultural variables to consider. But let me go to the next. I'm not going to take time with culture right now, and say this is probably the most important skill for diffusing anger. So in my experience working with angry and violent people, and I taught graduate social work students how to work with angry and potentially dangerous people. Working on this and testing it out when you're in the stress, the fire of conflict, will really pay off. When people feel empathetically heard, they will normally trust you more and share more of what they need to share to do peace building. And you will hopefully get to the deepest level of careful listening, or paraphrasing, the level of what I call speaker meaning. What is most important? What does the speaker need? This is called reframing in peace building. We also say detoxifying and laundering language. And we separate problems from people. So we're learning to hear what people aren't saying, right? That's what we're trying to do. Now this is the masterful level of peace building. Even when someone attacks us with negative language, with profanity, with anger, with practice, we learn to stay calm. We do assert boundaries to respect and protect ourselves, but we are able to hear what angry and potentially dangerous people need. And that's masterful peace building. Okay, let me go on to this deepest level of paraphrasing, the level of meaning, what is most important to the speaker. We are actually able to help speakers who are upset better understand what they need by our calm container, our strong, respectful container. When I am teaching negotiation, we talk about positions or demands, what people are saying they must have. You know a demand, I don't need to explain this. That's the surface level of paraphrasing. That's what the speaker actually says to you. We as peace builders must learn to reframe these positions to interest, to human needs, to what will actually satisfy the person. So, positions are win-lose, my way or no way, right? You must do this, you should do this. But human needs, what actually satisfies people, can be very, very different. And you'll see this as you start to practice this. If you experience threat or attack with somebody, say you're having a fight with your girlfriend, boyfriend, I would encourage you to look for gold, to look for what you want to pull forward. Now, obviously, that's not the threat or attack, but what is being said that might be used for a win-win. Anytime somebody is hungry, scared, homeless, tired, those are basic physiological human needs. So that is something you want to ask. Is my boyfriend too tired? Is too hungry, right? Does he need a good night's sleep? And I'm showing you a couple of slides from my practice peace building. If anybody like former President Donald Trump tempts you to do a marathon negotiation session where nobody sleeps, you can become quite vulnerable, right? So don't go there. Safety is something that we all need, we all want, and we don't have in the United States today. So assessing what can we do so this person feels safe is important. You are learning in psychology of peace building how to create a safe, non-judgmental, supportive space with each other and others. That's really critically important. Everybody needs love, right? We all need to feel like we are respected, that we're welcome, that we belong. And these are all needs that you can give to a speaker to create a win-win collaboration, to build peace. We all need to feel esteemed, that people like us, that they respect us, that they value us, and giving that to speakers can create a win-win. And then next, the highest level is what helps people become their fullest selves as human beings. And anytime you can do that, Living Inspiration is guiding you through that process. But anytime you can do it for another, you are helping create that win-win environment with your listening. You know, I teach restorative justice. It's another general education course that I teach. I think I'm going to skip ahead. Let's see. Yeah, actually, I'm just going to stop here with the PowerPoint and say anytime you can identify the speaker's underlying interests, that's what we call it, human need, what will satisfy them and calm them down, what it is that will help them in building peace, you're at the deepest level of careful listening, the level of reframing. I know it's a lot to introduce you to each week, but please, all questions are welcome in our Canvas discussion this week. Have a wonderful week.